Ingersoll's Lecture on Skulls, Part 2 of 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Now, if men have been slaves, if they have crawled in the dust before one another, what shall I say of women? They have been the slaves of men. It took thousands of ages to bring women from abject slavery up to the divine height of marriage. I believe in marriage. If there is any heaven upon earth, it is in the family by the fireside, and the family is a unit of government. Without the family relation that is tender, pure and true, civilization is impossible. Ladies, the ornaments you wear upon your persons tonight are but the souvenirs of your mother's bondage. The chains around your neck and the bracelets clasped upon your white arms by the thrilled hand of love have been changed by the wand of civilization from iron to shining, glittering gold. Nearly every civilization in this world accounts for the devilment in it by the crimes of woman. They say woman brought all the trouble into the world. I don't care if she did. I would rather live in a world full of trouble with the woman I love than to live in heaven with nobody but men. I read in a book an account of the creation of the world. The book, I have taken pains to say, was not written by any God. And why do I say so? Because I can write a far better book myself. Because it is full of barbarism. Several ministers in this city have undertaken to answer me, notably those who don't believe the Bible themselves. I want to ask these men one thing. I want them to be fair. Every minister in the city of Chicago that answers me, and those who have answered me had better answer me again, I want them to say, and without any sort of evasion, without resorting to any pious tricks, I want them to say whether they believe that the eternal God of this universe ever upheld the crime of polygamy. Say it square and fair. Don't begin to talk about that being a peculiar time, and that God was easy on the prejudices of those old fellows. I want them to answer that question, and to answer it squarely, which they haven't done. Did this God, which you pretend to worship, ever sanction the institution of human slavery? Now, answer fair. Don't slide it around. Don't begin and answer what a bad man I am, nor what a good man Moses was. Stick to the text. Do you believe in a God that allowed a man to be sold from his children? Do you worship such an infinite monster? And if you do, tell your congregation whether you are not ashamed to admit it. Let every minister who answers me again tell whether he believes God commanded his general to kill the little dimpled babe in the cradle. Let him answer it. Don't say that those were very bad times. Tell whether he did it or not, and then your people will know whether to hate that God or not. Be honest. Tell them whether that God in war captured young maidens and turned them over to the soldiers, and then ask the wives and sweet girls of your congregation to get down on their knees and worship the infinite fiend that did that thing. Answer! It is your God I am talking about, and if that is what God did, please tell your congregation what, under the same circumstances, the devil would have done. Don't tell your people that is a poem. Don't tell your people that is pictorial. That won't do. Tell your people whether it is true or false. That is what I want you to do. In this book I read about God's making the world and one man. That is all he intended to make. The making of woman was a second thought, though I am willing to admit that as a rule second thoughts are best. This God made a man and put him in a public park. In a little while he noticed that the man got lonesome. Then he found he had made a mistake, and that he would have to make somebody to keep him company. But having used up all the nothing he originally used in making the world and one man, he had to take a part of a man to start a woman with. So he causes sleep to fall on this man. Now understand me, I do not say this story is true. After the sleep had fallen on this man, the Supreme Being took a rib, or as the French would call it, a cutlet, out of him, and from that he made a woman. And I am willing to swear, taking into account the amount and quality of the raw material used, this was the most magnificent job ever accomplished in this world. Well, after he got the woman done, she was brought to the man, not to see how she liked him, but to see how he liked her. He liked her, and they started housekeeping, and they were told of certain things they might do, and of one thing they could not do. And of course they did it. I would have done it in 15 minutes, I know it. There wouldn't have been an apple on that tree half an hour from date, and the limbs would have been full of clubs. And then they were turned out of the park, and extra policemen were put on to keep them from getting back. And then the trouble commenced, and we have been at it ever since. Nearly all the religions of this world account for the existence of evil by such a story as that. Well, I read in another book what appeared to be an account of the same transaction. It was written about 4,000 years before the other. All commentators agree that the one that was written last was the original, and the one that was written first was copied from the one that was written last. But I would advise you all not to allow your creed to be disturbed by a little matter of 4,000 or 5,000 years. It is a great deal better to be mistaken in dates than to go to the devil. In this other account, the Supreme Brahma made up his mind to make the world and a man and woman. He made the world, and he made the man and then the woman, and put them on the island of Ceylon. According to the account, it was the most beautiful island of which man can conceive. Such birds, such songs, such flowers, and such verdure. And the branches of the trees were so arranged that when the wind swept through them, every tree was 1,000 Acolian harps. Brahma, when he put them there, said, "Let them have a period of courtship, for it is my desire and will that true love should forever precede marriage." When I read that, it was so much more beautiful and lofty than the other that I said to myself, if either one of these stories ever turns out to be true, I hope it will be this one. Then they had their courtship, with the nightingales singing, and the stars shining, and the flowers blooming, and they fell in love. Imagine that courtship! No prospective fathers or mothers in law, no prying and gossiping neighbors, nobody to say, "Young man, how do you expect to support her?" Nothing of that kind. Nothing but the nightingale singing its song of joy and pain as though the thorn already touched its heart. They were married by the Supreme Brahma, and he said to them, "Remain here. You must never leave this island." Well, after a little while, the man, his name was Adami, and the woman's name was Heva, said to Heva, "I believe I'll look about a little." He wanted to go west. He went to the western extremity of the island, where there was a little narrow neck of land connecting it with the mainland, and the devil, who is always playing pranks with us, produced a mirage, and when he looked over to the mainland, such hills and vales, such dells and dales, such mountains crowned with snow, such cataracts clad in bows of glory did he see there, that he went back and told Heva, "The country over there is 1,000 times better than this. Let us migrate." She, like every other woman that ever lived, said, "Let well enough alone. We have all we want. Let us stay here." But he said, "No, let us go." So she followed him, and when they came to this narrow neck of land, he took her on his back like a gentleman, and carried her over. But the moment they got over, they heard a crash, and looking back, discovered that this narrow neck of land had fallen into the